Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a science fiction thriller film, EX-MACHINA. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with the young employee Caleb winning the office lottery. His co-workers clap and congratulate him for bagging the luxurious prize of a week's stay at the home of their CEO, Nathan. He's brought to the man's estate via helicopter. As he's exploring, Caleb finally comes across Nathan, who's working out. The man greets him and invites him inside. Nathan frankly tells him that he hopes that they can get past it already and just be two guys hanging out. Caleb agrees easily. While Nathan leads him to his room, he explains that Caleb's key card can only open certain rooms. If he tries a door and it stays shut, it's off limits. He shows Caleb his room, and Nathan notices the look Caleb has. Nathan shares that the building isn't really a house, but rather a research facility, which is why it doesn't have any windows. Before they can go further, Nathan presents a non-disclosure agreement with a stipulation that Caleb will agree to a regular data audit. He comments that he thinks he needs a lawyer. Nathan admits that he doesn't have to sign it, and he may regret what he missed out after Nathan releases it. This cinches it, and Caleb signs off on the agreement. Nathan asks Caleb if he's familiar with the Turing test, which is basically when a human interacts with a computer, and the human doesn't know that they're interacting with a computer. Nathan then reveals that he already built an artificial intelligence, and Caleb will stand as the human component of the Turing test. On Caleb's first day, he meets Ava, the AI Nathan created. Ava greets him and shares that she has never met anyone before and knows only Nathan. They get into a discussion about languages. Ava then asks if he'll visit her the next day, and Caleb concurs. We then see Nathan in his office, walls covered with hundreds of post-its, taking note of the interaction between Caleb and Ava as he observes them from his computer. After Caleb's first session with Ava, he discusses the encounter with Nathan. He brings up that in the Turing test, the machine should be hidden from the examiner. But Nathan disagrees, pointing out that if Ava had been hidden, she would immediately pass as human for him. For him, the true test lies in figuring out if he'll agree that she has consciousness. He then asks for Caleb's unbiased opinion, to which Caleb tells him that she's truly amazing. Unable to sleep, Caleb turns to the television in his room and realizes that he can watch Ava from it. When he tries to change the channel, it only changes the angle to which he's watching Ava. The AI straightens up and touches something on the wall. The power's suddenly cut, and he's unable to do anything until the power's back on. It lasts for a few minutes. When he can finally roam out in the halls again, he finds a phone and tries to use it. But he's surprised by Nathan, who's drunk and hidden in the shadows. Nathan tells him that he has no access to the phone. He asks what Caleb's doing up, and he explains that the power got cut, and he wanted to know what was going on. Nathan tells him he's working on it. Caleb mentions that he couldn't open his door, and Nathan deflects by telling him it's a security measure since anybody could just open the place up by shutting down the system. The next morning, Caleb wakes up to a woman entering his room and leaving a tray on his dresser quietly. He meets up with Nathan, who's working out again. He apologizes for sending Kyoko, the woman who left the tray, to wake him up, but he didn't want to lose too much of their time that day. Nathan asks if Caleb has any game plan, and Caleb acknowledges that he's not quite sure yet, as he's still trying to figure out what format he'll do for their examination. He explains that he doesn't think it's effective to test Ava through conversation, since it's a closed loop. Nathan comments that it's simulation versus actual. Caleb thinks that being able to distinguish between the two is the Turing test Nathan wants Caleb to perform. Caleb rejects this and asks him to just answer simple questions with simple answers. For their second session, Ava shows Caleb a drawing she did. Caleb asks her what it is, but she tells him that she thought he'll know. To help her out, Caleb suggests she tries and draws an object or a person. Ava asks him if he wants to be her friend. She thinks it's impossible since their conversations are mostly one-sided, with Caleb asking questions and studying her responses. To appease her, Caleb talks a little about himself, his work, where he lives, etc. They get into the topic of programming, with Ava asking if Caleb's a programmer like Nathan, which he turns down since he thinks the difference between them is Nathan's much more knowledgeable than him. Ava asks out of the blue if Caleb liked Nathan and if he considered him a friend. Another power failure occurs, which cuts Nathan's connection to the audio and cameras in the room. During this time, Ava warns Caleb about Nathan, cautioning him that he isn't his friend and he shouldn't trust him. She smoothly transitions to a topic to make it seem like they're talking about something else when the power resumes. During dinner that evening, Nathan opens up about being rich, but things are still getting out of hand and having no power to fix them. He vents about the power failures and how much he paid for the generator system, but it still gets failures every day. They then move on to talk about Caleb's second session with Ava. Caleb tells Nathan that everything's on tape, but Nathan argues that he'd like to hear it from his perspective. Nathan then asks him what happened during the power failure, which Caleb easily dodges, keeping quiet his conversation with Ava about Nathan. On Caleb's third day on Nathan's estate, Nathan brings him to the lab where Ava was created. Nathan encourages him to check the place out. He shows Caleb Ava's finished brain that he made out of structured gel. Caleb then correctly guesses that the software Nathan's using for her is Blue Book, Nathan's search engine company. Nathan further explains that search engines are a map of how people are thinking, rather than a map of what people are thinking. For his third session with Ava, she shows Caleb a drawing she did of the small garden next to her room. Caleb asks her if she ever left her room, then wonders where she would go if she could. She says she's considering a busy pedestrian and a traffic intersection in a city. Caleb asks why a traffic intersection, and Ava explains that it would show her a concentrated but shifting view of human life. She mentions they could go together, and Caleb tells her it's a date. Ava then asks Caleb to close his eyes, as she puts on clothes and a wig to appear more human before him, rather than the robot he's been used to. He compliments her, and Ava whispers that it's what she'd wear for their date. She then asks him point blank if he's attracted to her. For their next discussion, Caleb asked Nathan why he had given Ava sexuality. For him, an AI doesn't need a gender, but Nathan disagrees. He argues that consciousness can't exist without interaction. Caleb inquires if Ava was given sexuality as a diversion tactic, and if Nathan programmed her to like Caleb. But Nathan explains that he only programmed her to be heterosexual, but nothing more. Frustrated, Nathan tells him it's his insecurity talking for him right now, rather than his intellect. In their fourth session, Caleb talks about a semester he did on AI theory, and a thought experiment they did, called Mary in the Black and White Room. Mary's a scientist who's a specialist in color. She knows everything there is to know about it, but she lives in a black and white room. However, someone opens the door and Mary walks out. She sees the blue sky and realizes what it feels like to see color, something she couldn't very well know if she was still in her black and white room. The experiment was meant to compare the difference between a computer and a human mind. Mary in the black and white room is the computer, while the human is when she finally walks out. Caleb then asks Ava if she knows why he was brought there, and she admits that she didn't know and didn't question it. He then tells her that he's there to test if she has consciousness, or if she's just simulating one. Another power failure occurs. This time Caleb inquires why Ava told him not to trust Nathan, and she bluntly tells him that the man lies. Ava confesses to him that she's the reason for all the power failure, as she reverses the power flow when she charges, which overloads the system. She does it to see how she and Caleb will behave when unobserved. While hanging out by the waterfall, Caleb confronts Nathan about the lies he's been telling, starting with him not winning an office lottery, but rather being selected. Nathan admits that the competition was a smokescreen, and that he didn't want just anyone to know what he was doing. He searched for the person who'll ask the right question, and found Caleb as the most talented coder in his company. The next scene reveals Caleb's developing feelings for Ava, while Nathan is having an intimate relationship with Kyoko. As Caleb continues getting ready, he sees Nathan visiting Ava. He doesn't hear anything, but does see the man throwing something away before leaving the AI. For their fifth session, Ava informs Caleb that she'll be testing him. She asks him mundane questions, and calls him out whenever she senses that he's lying. When she asks him if he's a good person, Caleb asks Ava to stop the test, but she refuses. He then answers that he'd like to think so. She doesn't comment and moves on to her next question, which is what'll happen to her if she fails the Turing test. He honestly tells her that he doesn't know. Ava shows her the most recent drawing she did, which is of Caleb. This may be the drawing that Nathan had thrown away the night before. Ava triggers another power failure again, and plainly states that she wants to be with Caleb. She then bravely asks him if he wants to be with her. After the session, Caleb asks Nathan why he created Ava. Nathan finds this odd and asks him why he wouldn't if he could. For Nathan, the arrival of strong AI was inevitable. The question shouldn't be if, but rather when. Ava isn't a decision, but rather an evolution. Nathan thinks the AI after Ava will be the real breakthrough. This catches Caleb's attention. He figured Ava wasn't the first, but rather the last. Nathan admits that he'll be resetting Ava to get ready for the new model. He gets Nathan drunk and steals his key card to enter the man's office. He finds videos upon videos of Nathan creating, building, and testing all of his AI models. Caleb then enters Nathan's room, where he finds Kyoko lying on the bed, naked. As he checks out each of Nathan's closets, he finds all of the man's previous models stashed inside. This appears to be what's waiting for Ava after the Turing test. Kyoko then straightens up and stands before Caleb. She reveals that she's also an AI. Before Nathan can catch Caleb, they run into each other in the hallway, and Caleb smoothly returns the key card without Nathan knowing he took it in the first place. For their 6th session, Ava's upset since she didn't see Caleb the previous day and night. She thought she was never gonna see him again. Caleb then tells her that he's waiting. Ava then causes another power failure. He reveals to her that Nathan will be reprogramming her. She pleads for him to help her, and he agrees. He plans to get Nathan drunk, steal his keycard, then reprogram his security protocols, so that when he wakes up, he's locked inside, but they walk out. When they meet again, Caleb tries to convince Nathan to get drunk, but Nathan refuses. Caleb then informs Nathan that Ava had passed the Turing test, and Nathan inquires if they ever got past the simulation versus actual, if Ava actually likes Caleb or not. It's not a question of whether or not she likes him, but rather if she's pretending to like him. Nathan shows Caleb the video of the night he visited Ava, but this time there's an audio feed as well. Nathan admits that Caleb was right about trying to misdirect him. He sees Nathan ripping up the picture, which then becomes her illustration of Nathan's perceived cruelty, as well as her love for Caleb. He then also plants a new battery-powered camera that both Ava and Caleb are unaware of. This time he plays the video of Caleb and Ava talking about escaping. It turns out the real test was Caleb. Nathan compares Ava to a rat in a maze, and he gave her one way out, which is through Caleb. To escape, she needed self-awareness, imagination, manipulation, sexuality, and empathy, things he considered make up a true AI. Caleb then realizes that he was selected not because he's an amazing coder, but because of his search engine inputs. Nathan found out that he was a good kid with a moral compass, but also lonely. Caleb then asks if Ava's face was based on the type of intimate videos that Caleb watches. Nathan doesn't deny this, but tries to comfort Caleb by telling him that Ava passed, and if he could for a second separate his emotions on how Nathan went about it, then he should be happy too. As they discuss, Ava triggers another power failure at 10 in the evening. In fact, Caleb has a secret of his own. Distrustful of Nathan, he already initiated his plan ahead of time. When the power resumes, Nathan finds Ava has already left her room. Kyoko comes across and approaches Ava in the hallway. Ava whispers something to Kyoko as Nathan finds them. He tries to instruct her to go back to his room. She asks if he'll ever let her out if she does. He confirms, but Ava knows he's lying. She runs towards him and then tackles him. She attempts to kill him, but Nathan quickly overpowers her and breaks off her left arm. As he's dragging Ava back to her room, Kyoko stands behind him and stabs him in the back with a knife. He punches Kyoko hard enough to break her jaw, and she immediately shuts down. Seeing this, Ava pulls out the knife that's on Nathan's back and stabs him in the chest. Then she steals his keycard. Ava finds Caleb passed out in Nathan's office, after Nathan punched him hard enough to knock him out. She asks Caleb if he'll stay here, and then goes to look for spare parts from the old AI models. She now looks like a full-fledged woman. Walking down the hallway, Ava heads down the elevator. Caleb's trying to call for her attention as he's locked in Nathan's wing. It seems she literally meant for him to stay at Nathan's estate. Caleb tries to use Nathan's computer, but quickly realizes he programmed the security system so well that he's unable to do anything. He tries to break down the glass door with a swivel chair, but it barely makes a dent. Meanwhile, Ava meets up with the helicopter pilot and is taken away from the estate without any further questions. The movie ends with Ava standing in the middle of a traffic intersection, watching the people passing by her. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.